The big concern now is how the environment has been affected and how badly. Ron Azawa is standing by near the tire dump. Ron?
The tire dump has become one big environmental question mark ever since the fire. The Ministry of Environment is in charge of the cleanup and the environmental assessment. Some say it's going to be a job that's even harder than putting out the fire.
We're going to have full body protection.
We're trying to devise a program to deal with the aftermath.
Safety rubber boots.
Yep. Sample results, air quality results,
Impervious gloves.
quick turnaround time,
Temperature
range.
And respirators.
It's 8:15 in the morning.
As the study continues, we'll find out just exactly what is down there.
These are Ministry of Environment scientists, engineers, and hydrogeologists.
Perimeter wells, sentinel wells.
There's a feeling of responsibility and pressure. The fire is out. It's their job to oversee the cleanup and to try to get a handle on the long-term environmental impact of 14 million burned tires. In the United States, there have been two major tire fires, one in Everett, Washington, the other in Winchester, Virginia. 7 years later, they're still cleaning up. Unusually high levels of zinc have shown up in local streams. There is still concern about water contamination. The Haagersville experience may or may not be the same. The cleanup is moving faster. The soil structure may be different.
You can see that the water here has a lot less of the oily sludge on it than just back over here, and that's as a result of some of the skimming operations.
That water is quite a bit cleaner than it was during the height of the fire. Got quite a bit less solids. For a while it was kind of yellowy browny. Now it's flowing a lot cleaner.
Right now, this is the situation in Haagersville. The surface runoff from the fire is being contained and controlled. A farmer's field just to the south has turned into a water treatment plant.
After the water is treated, it will go into these lagoons. Then it will be tested to see just how well the treatment has been, how effective it's been. Complete remediation of the site will be in millions of dollars, no doubt about it.
Drilling rigs have been set up to extract cross-sections of the underground soil. This is the only way to tell if oily runoff from the fire is getting deep into the bedrock. There's no easy way to get answers. It takes time and patience. The groundwater moves slowly, about 1/2 to 1 kilometer a year.
All of that kind of information that we can get out of these boreholes will be used to compile a picture of the site underneath the ground. The layers of the rock, the layers of the soil, and just where the groundwater is moving.
If contaminated water is detected, they say there are several options. The most extreme is injecting pressurized water into the rock, forcing contaminated water out. They're hoping it doesn't come down to that, because it's difficult and expensive. It costs $1.5 million to put the fire out. As you heard, it's going to cost millions more to clean it up. In Winchester, Virginia, the cleanup bill is $7 million, and they're still counting. Back to you, Hillary.
All right, Ron, thank you. And our guest tonight here to answer questions, not just from the citizens of Haagersville, but also our questions. Our first, Mr. Keith Richardson. He is the regional chairman of Haldeman, Norfolk, and he has been helping to administer the compensation for those displaced and otherwise inconvenienced by the fire. And Dennis Corr, he's from the Ministry of the Environment, and he has coordinated the efforts on the site to contain the contamination produced by the fire, and he is going to remain on site. Mr. Corr, do you have any idea how long you're going to spend here in Haagersville?
I think I'm going to be here a long time.
Are we talking months?
I'd say minimum months, but basically it's going to be as long as it takes to get the site completely cleaned up.
Mr. Corr, how long will people here in this room have to wait before they know whether it's safe to drink the water?
Well, what we have instituted is a public liaison process, and the citizens have set up their own public liaison committee. It's meeting once a week right now, and we intend to bring the data each week to the citizens so we can discuss it in detail and explain it to them.
But for the moment, they've got to drink bottled water. They can't drink water from their wells.
Well, when you say they can't drink water from the wells, so far all our tests have shown that there's no contamination from the tire fire that has reached any drinking well, even the ones that are closest to the site.
But what's your advice to them? I mean, if you had children here, would you let your children drink the water?
The advice of the medical officer of health, and it is strictly precautionary, is that they should drink the supplied bottled water until he's personally satisfied.
All right, Mr. Kaur, thank you. We'll come back to this later.
Okay.
This is CBC at 6, live on location in Haagersville. Uprooted and driven out. What next for the LaForme family?
It's a mental stress, like the not knowing and the fear of what's going to happen in the future. Like, do we lose our house? There's no way we could sell it now.
In national news tonight, the Meech Lake Constitutional Accord has suffered a major setback. In a throne speech today, Newfoundland announced that it will rescind its approval of the deal. Premier Clyde Wells says Quebec and Ottawa are showing no signs of accepting changes to the accord. The announcement may be the fatal blow for Meech Lake. In Ottawa... This is CBC at 6, live on location at the Haagersville Community Center. The Haagersville fire has changed the lives of hundreds of people. Whole families were uprooted and left homeless. Cass Rusi has the story of how some of those families are coping.
Thank you, Hillary. You are seeing rush hour now in Haagersville. It's very quiet right now, sharp contrast of just a few weeks ago when hundreds of media and government officials descended upon this town. At the height of the fire, hundreds of families had to flee their homes, leaving everything behind. Now, the province has tried to make life just a little more bearable for those families. Here's their story. The LaForme family has never been closer. In a cozy, if not cramped trailer just outside of Haagersville, mother, father, and daughter are finally getting a day of rest.
Get my roast ready.
They are the Haagersville gypsies, living first with friends, then moving into motels before settling into this new mobile home. There's still lots to get used to. For Steph, that's adjusting to a smaller kitchen.
This is my room. See, we don't have that wall. And this is my bed down here.
For daughter Karen, that's showing her friend that her new bedroom doubles as the storage room.
This is scuba stuff. My dad, scuba diving, he goes scuba diving.
Wind shifted and it all came swaying towards the house.
The LaFormes live directly behind the tire dump. These pictures were taken moments after black smoke filled the air. The LaFormes were literally driven out of their home, driven out by the black blaze of burning tires.
They don't know what's in there. Benzene and other chemicals they found that they don't know.
Dioxin.
Isn't it kind of tough for you, Steph, not knowing you won't be able to go back to that house? I mean, a home is...
That's right,
something so personal.
Like, we've been there 15 years, so there's a lot of memories. We raised our kids there, basically, and...
Well, these are the newspaper clippings from the 13th of February.
In the trailer next door, Kathy Easton is putting together a scrapbook.
When you look back, you don't really realize that this is what happened.
Like the LaFormes, the Eastons were forced out of their homes.
Will you go back to your house?
No.
Never?
Never, no. No, we won't. It's our lives in jeopardy and our children's, and if we stay, it could be grandchildren, and why should we put their lives in jeopardy? I mean, we're only a little, like a raindrop in the sky to the government, and, you know, who are we? We're nobody to them.
The LaForme family has been back to their home, but the visits are short. Just enough time to check that no one's broken into the house, that the water pipes don't freeze up. But no one goes inside. Not now, not ever.
It's all toxic.
It's a mental stress, like the not knowing and the fear of what's going to happen in the future. Like, do we lose our house? There's no way we could sell it now.
Look at that, that's pretty white snow. Look.
I mean, everything is in that house.
The Haagersville fire may be out, but its legacy isn't difficult to spot around the LaForme home. A home they'll never live in again.
It's all toxin, that stuff. Never get it off.
Hillary, the Eastons and the LaFormes both say that they're looking to the government to compensate them for their huge losses. The province has already come through with a compensation package looking at short-term expenses like hotel bills, grocery bills, etc. but we are all still waiting for details on a compensation package that would address the long-term problems, like perhaps buying out those homes closest to the dump. Hillary.
All right, Cass, thank you. And we have now in the hall with us Kathy Easton, who is one of the few people now who is still homeless. Most of the Haagersville residents have actually been able to move into their homes. Kathy hasn't. Kathy, first of all, it's not clear to me whether you haven't moved back because you think it's unsafe or because it's just too dirty to live in.
For both reasons.
For both reasons. Now, what's your question to Mr. Carr?
I was wondering, how can you say there are no contaminants in our home, that it is safe to return to our home when carbon black, a cancer-causing toxin, has traveled through our home for days and days? And you're saying that's safe to return to?
All right, Mr. Corr, what's the answer to that? I mean, is Mrs. Easton's notion correct?
Well, I don't think anybody has told you that it's safe to return to your home at this time. I believe the medical officer of health is setting up appropriate cleaning procedures, and that the air will be tested and the home will be tested before anybody would tell you it's safe to return.
Does that satisfy you, Mrs. Easton?
Well, that's not how I understood the statement to be, but I'll take it for now.
What about the compensation? I mean, is it clear the extent to which someone like Mrs. Easton would be compensated, Mr. Richardson? I mean, will the province buy back her house if she can't sell it and she can't live in it?
That decision has not been made yet. The committee met just yesterday looking at the issues and the options that were available, and we worked on developing the plan that was fair and positive, and we hope equitable to everybody that will be concerned. And that package is now on its way to Toronto and will have to be dealt with by the provincial cabinet before it can be put into place.
All right, so the short answer is we'll have to wait and see.
Yes, we'll have to wait. Hopefully by the end of this month there'll be a plan.
All right, thank you. We'll return to this after these messages.
Still ahead on CBC at 6, live on location in Haagersville.
Over there is where the fire car was.
Yeah, right across through there.
Too close for comfort. Farmers empty their barns and fear for their livestock.
You could see the black on the cobs itself. It's just, we don't want to see the animals to corn.
And this is CBC at 6, live on location from the Haagersville Community Center. The Ministry of Agriculture says that so far it has found no signs of contamination in water or milk from farms near the tire dump. Fruit and vegetables will be monitored later this year. Ron Azawa is standing by with reaction from local farmers.
That is good news, Hillary, but some say, nevertheless, their fears are just beginning. They have government assurances that things are fine now. They have sleepless nights about what the future may bring.
Over there is where the fire car was.
Yeah, right across through there.
Rose Matthews and her daughter Connie live 4 houses down the road from the tire dump. They're worried about their livestock and about their future. The barns are empty. The animals were moved out the night of the fire, even before the evacuation. Rose knew something was happening. It looks like you left in a big hurry.
Well, yeah, quite a scramble.
The manure isn't even cleaned up.
Now, did it smell in here when you moved
Yeah,
them
you
out?
could smell the smoke and that, like as I say, because it was coming over this way that day it happened, so as I say, it was close enough for me.
There's black soot everywhere, on the snow, on their hay, in their silo, and on their feed corn. This is the grain or the corn that you feed your...
Mainly for the pigs, eh? And cob corn, and of course I had the silo there for the cattle. And
you could see the black on the cobs itself. It's just, we don't want to feed the animals the corn.
Their biggest fear now is water, the lifeline of the farm.
When you pour it, there's little particles that go up to the top. You can see them right there. And it smells. We wouldn't even dare even try to taste it.
Yeah, there is a different smell with that. Rose has lived here since 1968. This is the first time she's had to leave. Her life and her livestock have been moved 70 kilometers away.
She's real quiet. She won't hurt you.
The animals are kept here at Connie's uncle's farm. This is a newborn calf.
We call him Tire King.
Why did you call him Tire King?
Well, it's because during the tire fire, he was born.
It costs $125 a day to keep the animals here. The drive is 40 minutes. They call it a major inconvenience.
Giddy up.
Back at their own farm, there's a painful silence. The absence of animals and the thin film of soot that covers their land makes the Matthews wonder if there is a future here, just 4 houses down the road from the tire dump. For certain expenses such as travel costs and cleanup, but her biggest concerns are the expenses she's running into now, like moving her livestock, buying clean feed. She's also concerned about compensation in the future if she has to move out.
All right, Ron, thank you. And here we are at the Haagersville Community Center. Rose Matthews couldn't be here tonight. She's a little busy, but we've got her neighbor, Bill Rowe. Bill, could you stand up, please? Now, you're right across the street. What do you farm?
We have beef cattle.
Beef cattle?
Yes. And my concern is the water. Eventually, I think that oil is going to get down into our wells. And
okay, let's move to Dennis Carr and ask him, should Mr. Rowe be worried about the water? Can his cattle drink the water safely, and are those beef cattle still going to be good for slaughter?
Okay, in terms of the well water, you mentioned my children, so I'd like to say hi to them, and yes, tell them yes, I would let them drink the water because it's tested 3 times daily and has come up clean.
And how about Bill Rowe's cattle?
In terms of the well water, we are still seeing it clean. We're testing the wells right around the site 3 times daily. The next ring of homes and wells we're testing once daily. So far, they're not showing any contamination from the fire, and we're drilling early warning wells right around where the fire was. And we're going to be monitoring those daily as well. If we see any contamination, we're going to be pumping those wells very hard, and we don't believe that any of that deep groundwater contamination would ever move off the site. That's why we're going to be here.
Now, does that reassure you, Mr. Rowe?
not really. I'm just wondering about that rock formation, and the oil will get down into the rock, I presume.
No, not necessarily, because we found that there's a couple of inches to about a foot of very fractured rock on the top, and then this really solid rock down to about 65 feet. That's what we're finding. That's why people in the area are drilling down to 65 feet for their wells.
All right, Dennis Carr, we have to interrupt now. We'll take a break and we'll come back to this question later. This is CBC at 6, live on location from Haagersville. This is CBC at 6, live on location at the Haagersville Community Center. And we're going to go now to the people in the audience. Almost everybody here, I think everybody here has been directly affected by the tire fire. Let's just get a sense of that. How many here in this room had to move out of their homes? Practically everybody. How many are still camping? Just one, Kathy Easton. How many are farmers here? Quite a few. And how many are worried? Just about everybody. Okay, let's move now to the audience. And I'd just like to ask you to identify yourself, what you do, and who you want to ask questions.
I'm Rod Poirier, I drive transport. I'd like to ask Dennis Orkees, what is going to be done with the farm after the cleanup is over? And how long will they test it to see if it's going to stay clean?
Yeah. That's what's going to be done with the site. Dennis Cord, do you know that? Do you know the answer to that question? What will happen to the Tire King dump site after the cleanup?
After the cleanup?
Yeah.
I don't think that has been determined yet. We're concentrating on getting the site cleaned up. And in terms of monitoring, we're going to be here indefinitely.
Next question. Yes. Could you identify yourself, sir?
My name is Mark Leota.
And what do you do?
I'm a health and safety representative. I work at Stelco for the United Steelworkers of America.
Your question?
And you're saying this is going to stay together. Your compensation that's going around, where your boundaries were on your evacuation zones, the person that lives beside your boundary line, who by no fault of his own wasn't included in the boundary line, they're not being compensated. This is what I hear.
Okay, I think the question is, how do you determine who is eligible, in fact, for compensation? I mean, is there a limit? Have you drawn a line around the area? Keith Richardson, perhaps.
The short-term package was for food and shelter for those who were evacuated from their homes, and it's my understanding that anybody who was outside of that zone and had a health reason and presented it, that would be considered as a special case. We've dealt with a number of special cases, and I'm sure we would deal with that one as well.
Do people here know how to apply for compensation?
Well, I would hope they know how to apply for compensation. They can pick up applications at the Regional Administration Building or at the Information Center, either place.
Is this a bureaucratic nightmare? Yes, it's a bureaucratic nightmare. Do you have a question? Could you identify yourself?
Mike Bradshaw Corners. I was an evacuee. I went to Townsend and they told me to first of all go to my insurance company. Well, my insurance company doesn't want to pay me anything because they said I didn't have any out-of-pocket expenses because I stayed at friends. So now what?
So that's a runaround. I mean, can you help them out? What's the problem?
Well, the insurance companies will be paying the first part of it if, in fact, the company does provide coverage. If the company does not provide coverage, it will be covered by this compensation plan.
All right, next question. Who else has a question? Sir, back here in the audience. Could you identify yourself, sir?
I'd like to establish the fact that Haagersville is 5 miles away from the fire and isn't being affected. We're not wiped out. Please tell the people that.
All right, do you have a question, though? No, you don't. Who has a question? Yes, back here. Could you identify yourself? Maybe could you stand up?
My name is Charles Edwards. My question would be, I want to know what you propose to do to clean this up, and how you're going to clean it up. Like, I know you're concentrating on the water right now, but the land itself has got to be dealt with, and who's going to handle that? And I know there's a lot of people in this area that are in the construction business, and that way I feel that we should have, it is our area that we should have at least a little bit of control on who works on it, and that way.
That question again to Dennis Corr. When will you know the land is not contaminated?
Let me say that we're not just concentrating on the water. That in fact cleanup of this site basically started on day one of the fire. That our aim was to keep contamination there. We trucked oil out of there all through the fire and brought it down to the refinery at Nanticoke so that it would not spread over the land. We have already started to truck out the most contaminated sludgy material from the site, and we're starting to solidify some of that, and we'll be trucking some more in the next few days. We are asking for bids for people to do the total site cleanup. We want to maintain the momentum on that, and I personally made sure that in that request for bids was the line that local resources should be used where possible, if there's any work that should be done on the site.
Yeah, Mr. Corr, could I just ask a follow-up question, which is, won't the groundwater, or the situation of the groundwater and the ground itself change with weather itself, with rain and the runoff that produces and snowmelt and so on?
We've had every weather you could dream of except, unfortunately, tropical since this started. We had freezing fog, snowstorms, thunderstorms, torrential rain, and we've kept the material on site, and we anticipate that we'll be able to keep on doing that through the spring thaw and through the rain, for instance, that's expected on Friday. So that's a key thing that we want to do, is keep that site contained.
All right. Another question over here. Sir, could you identify yourself, your name, and what you do?
I work at Texaco, or Imperial.
Yeah.
I live about a quarter of a mile from the site, and if my well is, if it's contaminated, what are you going to do for me for water?
Well, your well is not contaminated, and we're already providing bottled water. And as I explained earlier on, we're going to keep testing your well to make sure it's not contaminated, and we're going to put early warning wells right in around the site, and at any sign of contamination in those deep wells, we're going to be pumping with purge wells to make sure the contamination does not move off site. And any movement is very slow. It's about 1 kilometer per year. That's why we wanted to get the fire out fast and get right in on the site to do this, to stop it moving off. And I believe we can contain it.
All right, let's move back to this lady in green back here. Could you identify yourself, ma'am? What you do and your name?
Marie Trainer. I'm an area farmer.
Yes. What's your question, Marie?
One of the many questions I keep being asked is what's going to happen to the other several tire piles that are present across all of Ontario? Is the new tire tax going to be used to help clean them up? We know that there are a lot of landfill sites that will not take them. And we all do know that we are part of the problem.
Yeah. Good question. Again, I guess it's Mr. Core. We know what are there, about 25 million tires sitting in tire dumps across Ontario alone. Is the ministry just going to wait for another fire to start to fight that emergency?
No, we're not just going to wait for another fire to start. That's basically a two-part question, and I'd like to take it one at a time. The Minister of the Environment, Mr. Jim Bradley, is looking at changing the law so that we don't have to operate under the same type of director's order we were operating before, where it could be appealed and appealed and appealed and the whole thing could be strung out. Mr. Bradley wants to change the law so that when we issue a director's order, either the owner does it or we do it and charge back, and then we argue about it in the courts afterwards. But the law has to be changed to do that. In terms of recycling, the tire tax is for recycling. Unfortunately, this is a tough one. There is more money than good ideas. We have funded 4 firms to the tune of $1.1 million. They're still not making a big dent in the problem, and unfortunately, it seems hard to find the people with the good ideas and the business sense to set up a big enough operation to really do this.
All right, Mr. Gore, we have many questions, but no more time. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is CBC at 6. Still ahead, the Governor General's Literary Awards and much more in entertainment from Beth Harrington.
Thanks, Hillary. Yes, we have the Literary Awards, plus, Hillary, a movie not for the faint of heart called Mountains of the Moon, which takes you on a...
The four-wheel drive sport utility vehicle from General Motors. Tracker, built for serious fun.
Tonight on Toronto After Hours, the one-man dance sensation Kenrick.
Seafood delivered right to your door.
Cartoon art by Runt.
The film version of Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale.
The new bar, Billy Baroo.
And Tony and Tina's Wedding.
On the fifth estate, and African nations fight for freedom.
The problem of Namibia is that the minority whites are the ones who own the land.
Tuesday night on the Fifth Estate.
This is CBC at 6, live on location. We're broadcasting from a closed-down factory in the heart of Toronto with a group of people who've worked all their lives, many of whom are now out of work. They'll be talking later to Employment and Immigration Minister Barbara McDougall. There are so many stories in the shutdown of a plant, but the greatest single focus is always the worker. Ron Azawa found one man who was thrown out of work a year ago. Ron?
Hillary, I'm beside a jam packaging machine. It makes those small packages of jam you see in restaurants. It's just a machine, but if you think about it, this and all the other machines here represent people. The human side to industry clearly emerges when plants shut down, and research shows that those who are affected the most are the older workers who spend many, many years at one plant. But what happens to those workers when companies do shut down? Well, I spent a day with one of them. His name is Bill Arnold, and here's his story.
Gee, you know, I never ever thought it would happen to me, but it did, and you know, you're devastated by it.
Bill Arnold is 57. For 33 years, he worked at Pittsburgh Paint in Etobicoke. It closed a year ago. Now they're operating out of Ohio.
I can recall the day we found out, and some of the people I work with for 15, 20, 25 years, people that never drank a drop of alcohol. We went over to a pub there, like we were sent home that day, you could go home, and here they were in there drinking. They were walking around stunned.
Bill has been looking for a job for a year now without any luck. After being a breadwinner for so long, there's something degrading about